Andy says, could you please explain the last part of flush setting, please, if you've got time?
You've made you've got your, so there's your straight-sided setting burr. So now you have made this hole. It is so important that you get this distance from here to here exactly the same all the way around. If this seat here is not parallel with the surface, when the stone sits in, the stone will not be level. It's got to be level. So you would use this distance here as a gauge to measure this distance. Up to 2 millimeters. So 2 millimeters, okay. So up to 2 millimeters, I don't know which way to do my brackets, but up to 2 millimeters, the table of the stone, which is this part here, needs to be level with the surface. Stones greater than 2 millimeter, that is when the table now needs to be above the surface. You have to work on that through trial and error. So when this now is in place here, okay, your stone sits in here, your stone now should be level with the surface of the metal. And now you've got this little area of metal here to burnish over the stone. Some people will come along with a burnisher and put it vertical and just run around the outside of the stone. I don't tend to do that because I want to actually physically push this metal over onto the stone. If you had a hammer action handpiece, you could always use a hammer action handpiece and bash down in the metal. This way that then would force that metal over, but it's a little bit harsh. So what I'd be inclined to do is get a burnisher, a mini burnisher. We sell them, but we don't have any in stock at the moment. And it is a very, very thin mini burnisher, okay, that then would come down and you would burnish, you would push the burnisher in this direction down here. And as you push down on this direction here, this will burnish out the metal like this, okay? It will burnish the metal down. So you're pushing down, the metal can't go this direction, but there's a gap here, so the metal will move down in this direction. And what will happen is that the further you push down, the further this little piece of metal then will come down onto the stone like that. So that is the way that you would do it. Then, providing your burnisher is lovely and polished and has a nice sharp but rounded tip, then you can put the burnisher vertical and run it around, and it will just give a little bit of a bright cut on that side of your set in there. But it is a method of setting that has to be exact. This stone has to go into place exactly the same size as your original hole. So your hole is here, and perhaps you drilled a hole all the way through. So this distance across here has to be exactly the right size as the stone. Some people will come along and do that, okay, and this perhaps is 1/10 of a millimeter smaller than the diameter of the stone, and then they would get a 90-degree setting burr, which would look like that. And then they would put a slight undercut around here. Great, nothing wrong with that, but depending on what stone you've got, a diamond will be able to be forced into that channel. Anything less than a diamond, you run the risk of it shattering, cracking, and being damaged because the force you're having to force the stone into the hole. So I would not personally do that method. I would make sure that I drill all the way through. Make sure now that your setting burr is the same size as your stone, and the stone then will sit in. If there is a gap between the edge of the stone here and your wall, you have to then get the metal further over onto the stone because it has to bridge that gap first of all. So everything has to be exact. I keep a couple of these burrs on my bench. If, for argument's sake, I'm setting a 2mm stone, I would work up gradually through perhaps I drill a hole, then I would work up in gradual sizes up to, say, if I'm using a 2mm stone, I would then get a 1.9mm burr. 1.9mm burr, try the stone. If the stone doesn't drop, I would then use a 2mm burr and try it. But once you've used the burr at least once, you will find that the diameter of that burr will get slightly less due to the wear on the teeth from the cutting action. So I keep a few burrs to one side. So I may have a 2mm burr that I've used today, and I've used it a few times, but that burr now may be 1.95mm in diameter. So I would put that burr a little bit further back on my little block with all my burrs in, knowing that's a worn burr that I can always come to if I need to make a stone size of a hole at 1.95mm. So I always keep these burrs because you won't get a 1.95mm burr, but a worn one will be. And that's the way you would get exact sizes every single time. Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
setting, pusher or burnisher?
You should have a needle pointed burnisher. There's not much point having
That is convex. Thank you, guys. I will tell her. Thank you. She'll be really chuffed with that.
So
Thank
the
you.
needle pointed, not much point having a big burnisher this sort of size. You need to have a needle pointed one that you can actually get into this little area down here. It has to be needle pointed. It can't be cupped. It has to be needle pointed, polished and slightly rounded. And by pushing it down and rubbing it around on this edge here, it will push the metal over onto the stone. If that answers your question, I hope that does. But yeah, that's the way I would look at it.